After loads of requests for the following topic, I think it's finally time we dive right into Chris Chan and gender. Before we get anywhere though, I suppose I should probably explain my stance on the entire Chris and trans situation. Personally, I do not believe Christian is actually trans, which is why I don't use female pronouns when referring to Chris. He has shown time and time again that he only wants to appear as a woman in hopes of getting China. His entire transgender situation is just a ploy to get laid. The things that Chris does actually nullifies the experiences that actual trans people go through. It is disrespectful to actual trans people to even compare him to them. I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. But regardless, let's get on with this. Similar to the topic of faith, in the topic of morality, Chris's actual beliefs on gender and how it is classified are more complex than his stated beliefs. For someone so preoccupied with gender identity, Chris displays a staggering ignorance of how either gender typically behaves, and his views of both genders are extremely warped due to him taking the stereotypes he is presented with in television and music at face value. This is a self-portrait drawn by Chris himself, depicting his current self beating the shit out of his older self. Well, actually he's just kicking himself right in the penis. This perfectly describes Chris's current gender issues. It's surely a feat if you can make any sense out of this photo. Females. Chris repeatedly asserts his reverence of women and seems to have a comparatively glowing opinion of them, stating that he finds women empathetic. But, as stated at the beginning of the article, the truth is more complicated. While Chris has always preferred female friends and is known to be far more accommodating of lesbians than gay men, even going so far as to identify as one himself, in truth, based on his failed attempts of getting girls at the mall, Chris views females as hypersexual, preoccupied with shopping, given to conversing with others for hours, and fixated on getting married and having children. This is highly evident in his female characters in Sonichu. As a matter of fact, in Sonichu number 9, he referred to women as another species. This seems to be hyperbole, but considering Chris's abysmal knowledge of the sciences, it is difficult to be sure. His Sonichu character, who is a living embodiment of how Chris believes all women behave, has a personality which consists solely of the traits listed above, which is considered ironic as Chris constantly tries to show Sonichu with a passion for women's rights. Despite trying to portray them as being equal in power to their male counterparts, Chris rarely depicts Sonichu's fighting, more often simply leaving them on the sidelines of a battle to wail like damsels in distress, even when their boyfriends are in mortal danger. Even outside a battle, they tend to be little more than organic sex toys for the Sonichus. Males. Chris has harbored a deep hatred for men ever since his teenage years because he was bullied in grade school, largely because of his bloated ego making him extremely annoying to be around. Not to mention the fact that Chris is known to fly into fits of jealous rage whenever he sees a man more successful than him, especially if that man is getting some and he isn't. This gradually blossomed into a general distaste for masculine traits such as body hair. Indeed, in his nudes, it is apparent that he is surprisingly meticulous in shaving his body hair, certainly compared to other aspects of grooming. He also has stated, as shown in this video, a disgust for topless men and encourages men to wear muscle bras so he doesn't have to see their nipples. He even made a, now somewhat outdated, short list of the men he doesn't consider jerks, which included himself, his father, and Santa Claus. Since becoming a tomgirl, Chris's misandry has not abated. In recent years, he has variously referred to men in general as barbarians and Neanderthals. Is it Neanderthal or Neanderthal? I've heard it used both ways. Doesn't really matter, I guess. Which, coming from him, are rather ironic accusations for a number of reasons. Transvestism and transgenderism. It has been speculated for a long time that Chris has had gender issues. In 2005, he created Crystal Weston Chandler, which is widely believed to be a result of his autogynephilia, the fetish of seeing oneself as female. In Kristen Weston Chandler's future message, he mentioned you should try out the opposite gender's toys while keeping your own gender in mind, possibly indicating that he may have been in denial about transgenderism long before becoming a tomgirl. He also wondered what he would be like if he were born a female. In April 2011, photos were leaked by Surfshack Tito showing Chris dressed in women's clothes. Soon after, Chris announced he was a tomgirl, Chris believed being a tomgirl has resulted in him wearing feminine clothes, a brief attempt at piercing his taint, and growing long hair. Despite this, Chris still rigidly maintains that he is attracted solely to women. If you haven't been blessed with these beautiful photos, here's a small collection of his safe for work content. There is speculation as to why he has done this. Chris may have believed that joining the female community would aid in his love quest, which naturally it hasn't. And indeed, any sensible person can see that identifying as a lesbian actually shrinks his pool of potential sweethearts, given that lesbians are a minority group. However, Chris has recently made several telling statements that indicate he believes that he can use his gender confusion to his advantage. For example, on various occasions, Chris made statements to the effect of him being compatible with all women, or that he can go any way a woman desires. Statements like these show that he believes that by identifying as a female while remaining biologically male, he can appeal to women of all sexualities, although it remains unclear if this is his main reason for cross-dressing, or indeed whether it was a premeditated reason for it at all, or merely an idea he came up with later. However, being transgender does not stop him from prejudice against other transgenders. During his quest against Jeff/Francine, who is also trans, Chris calls her a pretty little lady man, and a he/she, and even Mistress Jeff, showing that even years into his transformation into a tomgirl, Chris is still Chris. Preferred pronouns. In 2014, Chris came out as a lesbian-identified male before identifying as a trans woman. After transitioning, Chris adopted the name Christine to accompany his new gender identity, along with the corresponding personal pronouns. In 2019, Chris updated his Twitter to reaffirm his gender pronouns. Also, I am female. Please address and talk about me with correct pronouns. She, her, hers. Thank you. Smiling emoji. Tranny pride worldwide. Chris calling himself a derogatory term for transgenders on the 14th of August 2014. Given that Chris lacks basic English skills, it shouldn't be surprising that he has trouble navigating the linguistic minefield of transgender, transsexual, transvestite, intersex, bisexual, hermaphrodite, and his own tomgirl. For someone who hates mislabelings, he sure is sloppy when it comes to these labels. On his OkCupid profile, when asked, "Would you date a transgender person?" he replied, "Yes, as long as she was born female and was still female, or a tomboy." He told Jackie that the fact that he loved wearing women's clothing did not make him a transvestite. He told gal pal Rebecca Bentley that the unclit made him bisexual when he meant intersex. He promptly flipped his shit when Rebecca asked if he wanted to fuck dudes now. All of Chris's claims about sexuality or gender identity need to be viewed through an autistic filter. That said, Chris has spent many years struggling to articulate his position on transgender topics. In the early years of trolling, he confessed that he was uncomfortable with the idea of transgender people and made it clear that he was not sexually attracted to them. "I have given thought about the transgenders and transvestites. I do not feel comfortable with them. Dicks are dicks, and I do not care about them except for my own," he wrote in a January 2009 chat. He later reiterated, "I do not much care for transgender people or hermaphrodites, but I do not discriminate them as individual people. I would never care to have sex with a hermaphrodite." Classic Chris on the 15th of January 2010. Maybe it's a reach, but I have a feeling that Chris actually dislikes transgender people. And maybe, just maybe, this is a ploy to get that oh-so-sought-after China. But of course, I'm probably wrong. Chris has never done anything that would harm other people. Yet somehow, he could not let the issue rest. When Bailey J introduced herself to Chris in a mailbag letter, revealing some naughty selfies, Chris's initial reaction was completely phobic at the sight of this hermaphrodite. Later, though, after Jay let Chris know that he had hurt her feelings, he reached into his shallow well of empathy. "I can relate to how you feel. Sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if I was born female instead, because some of my emotional, caring, self-conscious thoughts I had in my lifetime. Then I would remember that God must have made me all straight male for good reasons." When Chris looked at this beautiful woman with a large pickle, he saw a distorted reflection of himself. He was not ready to abandon his straight male identity, though. After becoming a tomgirl in 2011, even though he was still officially a heterosexual and proud to be male, some of his words and actions betrayed a deeper gender confusion. He started using women's restrooms. He told Jackie that he fantasized about fitting in at a lesbian bar, where he believed that he would have no trouble seducing a lesbian and persuading her to bone. "In lesbian's position, the scissor thing, with my dick in her vag." In December of 2013, he confessed to Rebecca, "I wish I was born female, and with the possibility of being a lesbian." he still seemed unsettled, especially since being a tomgirl wasn't working to attract a sweetheart/soulmate. On the 14th of August 2014, he came out publicly, although as what exactly wasn't certain, given his garbled and inconsistent vocabulary. The initial announcement was that he was a tomgirl intersex of female soul with male body, and a tranny crossdresser. Apparently unbeknownst to Chris, intersex is a chromosomal condition causing ambiguous genitalia and can present in many forms, none of which appear to be true to Chris. Then he said he was a lesbian-identified man and a cross-dressing tranny. 2 weeks later, he was telling Catherine that he was a lesbian tomgirl transgender male, but also 3/4 woman. By September, he seemed to have settled on lesbian transgender, a female lesbian soul trapped in a male body. In April of 2015, apparently no longer a man, he then changed his Facebook pronouns to she and his name to Christine. This month also saw the beginning of a flurry of Facebook likes for all sorts of aggressive transgender issues, such as restroom choice and gay marriage. Whatever he was certainly proud of it, and wasted no time trying to persuade his new LGBT personal army to wage war against local man-a-jerks. Imagine being led by Chris as he tries to run ops on people. That would have to be great. Does Chris want the operation? Almost immediately upon being discovered, Chris revealed that he had been giving a lot of thought to contingencies which might require him to lop off his duck. In 2007, he told Megan, "If I ever stoop down to changing my path, in example, becoming a homo, I might as well get a gender change operation." He also made it clear to anyone who asked that he was literally nauseated by the sight of his own penis, and all other penises. It might be self-evident, then, that lesbian transgender Chris would be eager to undergo sex reassignment surgery. In his intellectual discourses on transgender controversies, Chris has expressed some ambivalence. In a February 2009 chat, when asked if trans women should go under the knife, Chris replied, No. Also, I'll tell you this. And if I ever have a transgender child with both sets of, genitals, I would, raise that child to be a boy. Chris, apropos of nothing. He similarly told a troll impersonating transgender porn actress Bailey J., who also had an ass, that if I should ever have a hermaphrodite for a child, I would raise them with the mentality of a boy or a man. For a long time, these were puzzling statements, given his hatred for jerks and all manner of pickled cucumbers. As his own gender identity mutated, however, Chris revealed his reasoning. In early 2014, on his OkCupid Q&A, he was faced with a question: imagine you have a newborn child whose sex cannot be determined. A risk-free surgery performed immediately could provide male or female sexual and reproductive function. Which would you choose? Chris's answer was, "Do not perform the surgery." He added, "If a hermaphrodite, I would raise it to be male regardless, since it would not have any eggs anyway. Plus big bonus for him in sex with all women, lesbians included, I would imagine." Chris, exemplifying the wisdom of Solomon. In other words, there were two obstacles in the way of Chris losing his duck. First, a sex change operation wouldn't provide him with reproductive organs, since, as a woman, he would not be able to give birth to Crystal personally, which is his true fantasy. He must first impregnate someone, as many times as necessary until the appearance of his God-promised daughter. He can't adopt, because Crystal must come from blood, tears, and seminal descent. He criticized fellow transgender Ahuvia, I probably just mispronounced that, whom he incorrectly believed to be Jack Thaddeus, for trying to have the operation, claiming that he would definitely not be considered any at all a woman whatsoever, because he would not have a uterus, and he would have no reproductive organs. I mean, I want to have children someday. Obviously, he don't. In late 2014, he could not persuade a sperm bank, lesbians on a message board, or his friend Renee to serve as the vessel for Crystal. So for now, its purpose unfulfilled, the ugly growth must remain. The second reason why he can't get the surgery is that the duck is an attraction sign. As much as he loves to crow about being a lesbian, Chris wants to be open to all women, straight, bi, and lesbian. In a May 2015 Facebook Q&A regarding the operation, he was equivocal and wrote, "I am exploring making the best of this body for any woman born with a vagina." If he wants to be everything for everybody, he would need to hold on to the duck. It should also be noted that Chris doesn't have a fucking clue how sex reassignment works. In June of 2015, he posted an advertisement on Facebook. "I deserve to be a full woman with a functioning vagina, A- blood type, if anyone wants to put up the money and trade." As with most things he wants, Chris prefers to sit on his fat lesbian ass and wait for a magical transformation of my body from male to completely female. Not that Chris could afford sex reassignment, as it costs thousands of dollars. while Chris struggles to pay basic bills and spends what little he does save on frivolities like trips to BronyCon. I've always found it extremely interesting how people who supposedly live in poverty also take a lot of trips and buy stupid shit they don't need. It's almost like if you took more care of your finances rather than blowing them on needless bullshit, you wouldn't have these problems. In Quickville. Before his slide into femdom, Chris used the intersex character Sylvana to symbolize the evil trolls. The evil Count Graduan told her, "I'm going to grant you with the power to transform like a ditto. My price is that you will have to relinquish your ability to give birth, and you will be upgraded to have both parts. So with the biological upgrade complete, your years of training can begin." She proceeded to seduce and horrify the tranquil community. After Chris modified his gender identity, Roby Sonichu also became a tomgirl, and later a full-fledged male lesbian. His or her transition story is a major part of the plot in Sonichu 11. In May of 2015, he confirmed that Comic Chris was also a lesbian trans woman, and retconned Chris-chan Sonichu as a D-cup female with a uterus and ovaries, possibly to be renamed Chrissy-chan Rosachu. Then, through the power of his imagination, Chris managed to impregnate himself with a turkey baster and give birth to twins. This scenario is probably as realistic as Chris ever getting a handle on his own gender. In Sonichu 11, Colossal Chris-chan learns of his future self's identity and reflects on it, reasoning that he is not fond of partaking in brutish things, following his meaningless destruction of the 4-cent garbage building and subsequent murdering of several inhabitants. His battle with Mary Lee Walsh, in which he permanently paralyzes her with lightning-based weaponry, and his then retconned execution of the Asperpedia 4. Chris then magically starts transforming into a voluptuous woman, a sequence inspired by artist Miss Mako and her collection of gender-bending videos. To him, transitioning is a technique that simply requires an epiphany and ancient powers to immediately turn into a full-fledged woman. On the 6th of December 2017, Chris confirmed in a Facebook post that Rosachu was in fact male at birth, but had her genitals changed during a sex change operation before the events of Sonichu 8. He suggested that this backstory would be explored in the Sonichu 15 retelling of her and Sonichu's origins. However, he was extremely uncomfortable with this announcement and deeply in denial of the revelation, which he seems to believe came directly from the fictional character herself. In reality, the idea to make Rosachu trans probably originates from the idea guy, and its status as Sonichu canon is likely provisional. Non-binary genders. I really did not know how many genders there are, but I am not and do not judge. Have a good day. Chris's beliefs on non-binary genders. Given how complicated a topic of gender is to tackle, especially today, people tend to argue about what classifies as a gender, and therefore some people might argue that there exists more than two. In Chris's case, believing everything he sees without giving a second thought, also concluded that there are more than two genders, simply looking at a Facebook post about how Facebook is allowing their users to identify themselves as 58 different genders on September 17, 2016, taking it to mean that there are in fact 58 genders. The next month, Chris is interviewed on the same topic and asks how many genders there are, and simply says there are 58 because of that same Facebook post. In the comic. Wow, look at those titties! Man, it really does look exactly like Chris, doesn't it? Beautiful. And here's Chris's transformation into the female Chris-chan Sonichu. It's got quite the little hot ass, doesn't it? Chris, already conflicting with his own gender identity, also decided to give his avatar in the Sonichu comics the same exact characteristics since Sonichu 11. Once again, despite looking completely different from his real-life counterpart, decides to draw his avatar with the traits he's always desired since becoming a tomgirl, such as bigger breasts and wider hips, revealing very much of what kind of results Chris wishes to simply get from watching subliminal frequency hypnosis on YouTube, instead of saving up his money to get a sex change. Likewise, Chris decided to change his Sonichu form to a female Sonichu form. The only real difference between Chris's old form and his new form is that the newer form has added breasts, a functioning vagina, uterus, and ovum, eyelashes, the trademark female Pikachu tail, and the color of his shoes changed from black and white to turquoise and lime green. At the same time, Chris-chan Sonichu species is highly questionable, given how Chris never implied that his new Sonichu form was in fact a Rosachu, and instead refers to it as simply a female Sonichu form, and the character is still called Chris-chan Sonichu. Even though Chris has suggested renaming the character Chrissy-chan Rosachu, it still begs the question why Chris hasn't decided to make his new form into a Rosachu in the first place, seeing as how female Sonichus theoretically don't exist and that Rosachus are essentially the female counterpart of the electric hedgehog Pokemon. Despite giving the character the new and more logical name, He never implied that he'd do a redesign of the character itself to give it Sonichu traits. Seeing as though the idea guys had convinced Chris that Sonichu was actually a dude when she was born, the chances of this happening now are completely null instead of very slim. And that's going to do it for today's video. If you like what I do, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've also got an official Discord, in which you can find the link in the description. I've got more stuff coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.
Getting really tired of looking for this fucker.